Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I am your host, Monty Hook, and I am back in the studio today with Mr. Joel Brown, one of my favorite all-time guests. Mr. Joel Brown, how you doing?
Brother, thanks for having me.
Cheers, man.
We made it out of the rabbit hole a couple times together. We're going back in for the third time.
Yeah. So you've been traveling around the world the last little while, and you're back in Bali just for a few days.
Yep.
Welcome to Lighthouse Studios here in Bali. We're in Studio 3, by the way. Lighthouse Studios in Bali. Come check it out.
I love it. Yeah.
What do you think?
Dude, it's like we recorded in the older studio 2 other episodes. This is like the 2.0. This is the upgrade. This is next level.
Well, we called that the beta studio. So
a beta, okay.
Yeah. So here we are.
It's still pretty good for being a beta.
It was pretty good. It was pretty good. But now we're playing with the pros now. So
that's
mate,
it.
You've been traveling around the world doing your thing. You were obviously here in Bali for quite some time during the pandemic, and that was a topic of conversation.
The plandemic.
Last time we went down the rabbit hole on a few things, talking about the current state of the world and some of the things that are happening. We called it the jibby jab. I think we're not going to get evicted off Instagram these days. I don't know what the rules are these days, but we were being very careful around the language that we were using, and but we were still going there.
Yeah.
So you're back on the road, and you're a very well-known speaker, coach, trainer. You got your own podcast. You've interviewed some very high-profile people. I saw in the last year you've interviewed Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, he's cool.
So, congratulations on all of that. Like, that's pretty cool.
Thanks, man.
Thanks. Yeah, what's it like being back on the road, traveling? You're speaking at seminars and things like that, yeah?
Yeah. A couple speaking events. Look, man, it is tough to stay in creation when you're bouncing around so much.
Yeah.
But I used to build my lifestyle around my business.
Yeah.
And that was like really pigeonholing me into a place of feeling limited, right? But now what I do is I build my business around my lifestyle. Yeah. So it's like, hey, where do I want to be? Where do I want to travel? Who do I want to be surrounded by?
Yeah.
What type of people do I want to work with? And then my business is built based off that vision.
Yeah.
And it's so different, man.
Yeah.
It's so different. So many people do it the other way around. They're like in survival and struggling. Like, I need to build the business. Then I sacrifice the lifestyle.
I guess that's just a natural evolution of as you progress through business, right? It's like, you got to start at the ground level.
Absolutely.
And you got to earn your stripes. You got to do the hard yards. And like you said, a lot of people actually get stuck in that place. And like I was for 30 years.
Yeah.
So I agree. But so where have you been traveling to?
Well, I just came back from Mexico. I was in Mexico City, Puerto Vallarta, which is cool. Before that, it was the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
So I just booked a place on the beach there and spent 30 days after a really long 2 months of putting together an event in Canada, in Montreal, and speaking in Toronto. And it was getting really cold in Montreal. So I was like, all right, let's go to the beach, and hit the beach up. But there's something about just getting down in the sand and grounding yourself, because Montreal is a city. It's a beautiful city. It's just, when you're in a car all the time and you're, in the urban jungle, it is nice to come to the ocean or nature and ground yourself.
Yeah.
It sounds like kind of hippy dippy, but
I guess
it works, man. It really works. There's like a science behind it. It actually works.
Absolutely.
So I'm very mindful of that. And I think this is a good thing about Bali, where you are right now, where we are here, is you got rice fields, you got jungles, you got beaches. And, sometimes people slave away so much in an artificial environment. And then they are sitting in a car all day, and then they go back to their home where it's like a box, and they just live in boxes and lines and speed limits, and that's their life,
Yeah. No, definitely blessed here in Bali. I was in Australia for 1 week, and that's the first trip I've had since 2019. Actually, we met at the airport when we were flying out to Australia, end of 2019. That was
before
Christmas,
everything went crazy.
like Christmas 2019.
Yeah,
that's where I think we knew of each other, but I just ran into you at the airport randomly.
Yeah.
That was the last time I was in Australia. I was very happy just to stay in Bali. Super grounded here, super happy here, and I don't feel itchy feet to go and travel, but I'm not as young and young and fit as you. So,
man, you're as young as you feel, man. That's what it is.
So traveling around the world now, after being, in a semi-lockdown for you're in Bali for a year, like not going anywhere. What are you seeing around the world now that you're traveling again? Like, what is the is it different to before the pandemic? Like, is it just different traveling? Obviously, there's more, restrictions and there's more tests and more things going on. But is it better? Is it worse? Like, what are you noticing? Because you're going to a lot of different places.
Honestly, like, I feel like society, like, because we already know what the government's up to. They're just going to do what they do. They have, financial interests with these corporations. I can't expect anything less from them in the way of how they behave towards, society, and they love their authority and control. But my bigger concern is the masses, the mob, like the people, like you and I, society in general.
Yeah.
And I think that society in general has chilled out on trying to like oppress each other or tell each other what to do, which I think is good to be at that point. I definitely harbored some resentment and anger. I got to be honest with you. Like, I think just 3 years of putting up with it, I just got so sick of it, man. I got sick of people, coming around trying to tell each other what to do. Yeah. It's just like, just leave everybody to do their own thing. But you can see it's fear driven, right? And so we're just literally going from one fear to another. And then at some point you got to ask yourself, like, am I going to keep playing this game? Am I going to be roped into it energetically? Yeah. Is it worth it? Because if it's not, the pandemic, it's, the riots. If it's not the riots, it's some sort of war that's going on. If it's not some war that's going on, it's the economy. There's always like something, right? I was going to Europe recently, and then I had a friend that asked me, "Oh, I don't know if you should go to Europe, man. It's getting pretty crazy." I said, "What's getting crazy?" He said, "They got like an energy crisis that's looming." And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well, I went there and it's totally fine." And he's like, "Oh, do you think I should go?" And I'm like, "Bro, I could tell you all I want, but you've got to go there to experience it." And this is what's happening right now is there are still people back in their home that kind of fell into the loop of the quarantine, and they're still acting as if there's lockdown. Yeah. And they miss out. And I had people all around me during the pandemic saying, "Oh, you're never going to be able to get out of Australia. You're not going to be able to go to this place. Or you got to be able to," and I'm like, yo, it's about moving chess pieces. Yeah. Right? Like, you've got to understand how the game works. It's the same with financial investments. It's the same with the business scape. You and I are in business. That's a dog eat dog world, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to think it's all nice and charity and, you get to, make an impact, but it's cutthroat in the business world too. So you've got to know how to move chess pieces around. And at the same time, so how do I maintain my character while I'm in that place too, in that sort of, way of living your life. And I think a lot of people for the first time were really awake and their eyes were open to the fact that if they hadn't built structures and foundations that were strong enough to support the way of living in the way they wanted to, then now it's being compromised. And it was kind of beautiful to see it. It was beautiful to see that people were like, oh my gosh, because I sat on my hands for years and kept procrastinating and saying that I was going to do something, but I never did. Yeah. Now I'm feeling the repercussions and the heat of the fear and the lockdowns and everything else, right? So I think you got no one else to blame by that point. Like, we can get frustrated at things, but at the same time, it's like, man, what did I do leading up to it that kept me in the same place that I'm limited?
Yeah, I think you made a good point there. Like, people have been making decisions based on, what people externally have been telling them, what they see on the news, what they hear. And obviously there's, been real life restrictions of, okay, well, there's no flights, so you can't get on a plane. But now that the world is opened up again, people should be making decisions and making calls for their own life based on what their eyes see, not on what other people tell them. And I think that's one of the good things that has come out of this whole situation in the last couple of years is a lot of people have awakened to that. They've realized how much I have been controlled by external forces, by the government, by my parents, by what the news is telling me. I was in Australia and I was with my grandma. I just spent a lot of time with my grandma, and she's telling me all that's going on in Australia, everything that's happening with COVID, like where the breakouts are and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I'm not going to try to convince my grandma. She's 90, but she's a manifestation of, of this whole system. And she's just, somebody she just watches that box and she believes everything that comes through it. And it's just, it blows my mind how much people are so willing to have their lives run and controlled by something that they're not seeing with their own eyes.
Yeah. It's all a choice, man. They're choosing. They're choosing.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing for people to have to swallow, is the fact that
people don't want to backtrack on
whether
it.
it's unconscious or not, you're still choosing it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of people like to think that they're so conscious, right? Oh, I'm so conscious. And it's like, no, you're not. Like, no one really is. Let's be honest. Like, I was talking with Dr. Joe Dispenza, right? When I had him on my podcast, and he said that 95% of our thoughts are the same as the day before. We only think 5% new thoughts. And if you're intentional and you're doing some healing and you're like structuring your life and you're like taking action and you're assertive and you're negotiating, then you're thinking 10% new thoughts. Like you can double your income, your impact, your network, your net worth, and so on. But most people aren't doing that, are they? Like, it takes a lot of willpower to do that. And
also when I think also people, the human beings don't want to be wrong, and they don't want to feel like they're wrong. They don't want to be made wrong. Yeah. So it's a very hard thing to do, to actually backtrack and go, oh, okay, well, actually, I'm going to change because I was wrong. Yeah. People don't want to be wrong. Like, oh, I see this thing that's happening. I realize that maybe I was wrong in the last year or the last 2 years or the way that I've been doing things, and maybe there's another way, but people will just double down on, because it's an identity thing. It's like people do not want to be wrong. Yeah. Yeah. Well, then it just means that the decisions we were making, we now have to own. And a lot of people don't want to take ownership, right? Because it means that you weren't good enough. Yeah. Like it's what you make it mean all the time, and all these things. The thing I say for myself is, and for everybody, is question everything. Question absolutely everything, including myself. When I say something, well, why am I saying that? Question absolutely everything. Yeah. Because then it's like, I have to be curious. I have to explore. I have to acknowledge, oh, well, maybe I didn't have all the information about that. Maybe I jumped to conclusions on this one. Maybe I made myself wrong about this one. It's just a constant exploration of betterment for myself. Yeah. And I think to add to that as well, because that's great, I think to add, am I choosing from love or fear? Yeah. Right? Because love can be creation. It can be inspiration. Fear is survival, scarcity, lack. Yeah. And it's just a good audit to do on yourself. You know, that's a good word, audit. Constant audit. Yeah. Self-audit. Yeah. So sure. You're now back on the road, speaking to people, training people, coaching people. You've been coaching people for a long time now. What are you finding, or what's most potent for you in what you're teaching people now? Like what's coming up for people? Is it different, or is it just, do you have something that is really potent for you that you're working with people? Absolutely. Working with people on now? Yeah, absolutely. You got it. So, before we were talking about the challenges that are showing up in society. Yeah. Right. And there's like things in the news and the media that is so fear driven. The narrative is, batten down the hatchets, protect, save, buckle up, winter's coming, this is what Biden, that fool says all the time. And so people are like, oh my gosh, like it's, tough times are ahead of us. If we continue, yeah, for sure. Right. But there's so many different factors that are in play. But I challenge you on this here. I would say, are you happy with the results that you're getting in your life right now? Like if you were to check in and go self-audit, am I happy with the physical environment that I'm in? Am I happy where I live? Am I happy with my financial situation? Am I happy with the way my business is performing? Am I happy with my friendship circles? Like really audit yourself and see, am I happy? Now, if you're not, and you feel like, no, I'm not content with this, I'm not fulfilled, I don't feel harmonized, I feel like I'm in lack, I'm in scarcity, I'm in fear. The question is, if an economic collapse or a war was to kick off, a worldwide war, let's say World War III, if that was to kick off tomorrow, how screwed would you be? Right? Like really check in on that. And it's very, very hard. It's not impossible, but it's very challenging. It's like 10 times harder when you're stuck in procrastination and you're not in action and you're not assertive and you're not negotiating and you're not structured to try and build something in times of chaos. And this is what I saw before the whole pandemic was that like there were people going, oh my gosh, like I'm not going to be able to make money, I'm going to lose. And it's like, well, you've been watching my content and people that I've even interviewed, or like, you've been a student in certain things I've featured in for years, but you never took action. And now it's going to be hard. Yeah. What are you going to say to your little Timmy or little Lisa or your little kids at home when there's nothing on the table to eat? How do you tell your kids we don't have food to eat? Yeah. Right. And I'm not trying to get you in a scarcity space.
I'm challenging thought right now to think like, if I could work on my procrastination today, which procrastination is perceived pain of the future, or it's a fear of repeating the past. That's why people tend to procrastinate, right? Then if we could overcome that, which means that you now step into power, you now step into creation, you now become somebody that is a force to be reckoned with. You now have the smarts about you to be able to build business. You're not scared to take risks. All of these things are positive. Then that would be a better place to create from it, even before times of chaos. But if times of chaos showed up, you'd be still okay. And so this is why I'm coaching so many people right now around procrastination.
Yeah.
And it started with myself. I've been coaching for 14 years now, but 7 years ago, I found myself in these patterns of perfectionism. I found myself as a high achiever, ADHD, just like really like jumping around a lot. Like if anybody here has lots of tabs open on their computer, just imagine that in your mind, right? And so I was like, I want to tackle this. I want to work out a better structure for my life. So I identified my patterns, and then I went into it, and then I started creating, they're called like counter moves. So I was countering the pattern because my pattern was going this way for so long. I started countering it back that way, and I started noticing change in my life, like really positive changes.
Was it only in certain areas of your life? Like, I mean, that's one thing I noticed for myself. It's like in certain seasons, like I'll just be, business, I'm all good, and then, all right, well, my health is, maybe not. I've dropped the ball a little bit, or my relationship is really good right now, but my business is not so good. Yeah. So,
well, they're called trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right, and that's a lie too, because and I know it because I lived it too. I'm not saying it is just you doing it, like we all do.
Yep.
There's like a myth that
it's tough being human.
It's either I know, it's perfect, right? It's either or. It's like I can have this or I can't have that. I've got to starve myself from my family and romantic time, but kill it in my business, which isn't true. I believe that you can have everything, just not all at once, right? So it's like building it over time and getting things solidified, and then you've got that systemized and that works. James Clear, who I had on my podcast, he wrote the book Atomic Habits. Yeah, he says you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems
or expectations.
Expectations and systems, right? So like if you haven't built your systems, and people think systems is just business, you're incredible at building business systems. Like I've seen you spreadsheet things and do your projections and your numbers. You're great at that. But we get to do that in relationship. We get to do that with our health. We get to do that with our finances. We get to do that in our fun and adventure that we have. Obviously with flexibility, you don't have to be like super rigid with everything, because then you're just always in the masculine and structured or overly structured. But that's like the mechanical aspect of it. And I believe that we can create harmony because everything is touching everything.
Yep.
And as the tide rises, so do the boats, right? So that's the key. It's like if I can find the benefits of me sticking to my fitness goals, and that increases my cognitive function and it increases my blood flow, and I get better sleep because of my exercise, and I have endorphins and serotonin pumping, all those feel-good chemicals, and I look physically good and I feel confident, that's going to bleed into your business, and it's going to mean that you're going to probably score more clients. Probably
into your relationships and everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You become more attractive and all that, right? Yeah. Your moods increase and people want to be around you.
Self-confidence, your self-esteem, which then has you, be more magnetic and all sorts of things.
Yeah. And people want to work with people. People want to partner with people, do joint ventures with people that are happy and are more fulfilled, because they're more trustworthy. They're not going to be dramatic, and they're not going to try and steal and take because they're abundant. And that's the key. And I'm not saying that you can achieve that overnight. Like,
I think just something to add, because I know for myself, and it's probably true for everybody, is one of the biggest keys is, we are doing a dance. Life is just this dance of, all right, well, I've got to put more attention here, less attention there. It is a bit of a dance. And I do believe there is a way that you can have fulfillment across all of it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest key factor is, yes, there's putting the systems in places, and it's the being able to create what you want to create, but it's the relationship that we have with these parts of our life. It's like, I know for myself, if I'm not, as fit as I want to be, well, then I have a negative relationship with myself, and then that flows on to other things. So is it a problem that I'm not as fit as I was before, or is the problem that I now have a negative view of myself because of the relationship I have to that thing? And I think the way that you're also describing how you're now more consciously creating your life and your business around your lifestyle is when you're able to do that, that relationship that you have with business is not, it's not a desperate thing, right?
Right.
And that in itself is going to attract more of what you want because you're in an energy, in a space of
power and creation,
space and creation. So what comes to you is going to be very different as well.
Yeah, that's it. Where you become a weapon of mass creation, right? They talk about weapon of mass destruction. Destruction is scarcity, anger, fear.
Is this what you're teaching people now? This is your jam right now.
Yeah, and this is a key, right? So you what you were talking about just then is acceptance, understanding, love, joy, peace, creation, power.
Acceptance is such a big word. It is.
Yeah, if you've seen David Hawkins' chart, he's a psychologist, he's passed, but it's power versus force. You can even get the book on it. It's an awesome book. And if we look in the lower brackets, I believe God didn't create us to be in the lower brackets. The lower brackets is scarcity, it's fear, it's sadness, it's anger, it's apathy, you know, all these things that people got dragged into during the last few years. And so naturally there weren't as many people really creating. And then the other people that were like, hey, I'm not going to get roped into this, they went next level creation because they're like, wait, the world needs a solution. So it's always, you're always meeting this fork in the road. Which way am I going to go? What am I going to choose? Same with like, where am I going to put my time, my money, my energy? So if you're not at a level where you are even able to be present because you've got some good structures going on, you're just trying to get out of a hole. And this is where a lot of people are. Like people that are just getting by on paying their bills, people that hate their 9 to 5 and can't see any way out, people that are already dealing with like childhood trauma, you know, wounding from this event that happened when they were 5 or 6 years old, or this as they feel like it's an irreparable relationship with their mother or their father or wherever it may be. This is keeping them limited, so they can't even see creation. It's just like, I need to get out of this hole.
Is that also because they've not experienced something on that other side of the spectrum?
Well, again, you know, we only think 5% new thoughts, which shows us that we're not actually as logically driven as we think. Like people can say a lot of words and a lot of information. You could sit here and listen to all this stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're not emotionally inspired or feeling emotionally connected to something new,
if you're doing this audit like you're talking about and there's something missing, then
well, that's the thing. And so most people are still stuck in patterns. As much as they may logically want the business and they consciously go, I really love to create that and I'd like to make $1 million. If they still feel not worthy, then they're not going anywhere, right? They may fool themselves for a little bit. And this is where people go, fake it to make it, which I'm not a fan of, because it's like, no, you face the reality of what is, stand in front of that truth, even if it's scary as hell, and admit the fact that you haven't taken ownership. Like, let's start there, because that's a powerful place to build from. And so what I've done is I've found obviously my procrastination type, and I never knew there were types. Like it was just me. I was like, oh, I've found my patterns. But then when I was looking more at my patterns and going deeper in some other patterns, I went, wait a minute, there's some other categorized patterns that we could put together here. And so I started building it over the last, more so like 7 years ago till about 5 years back. I felt like I almost completed the system, and then I just fine-tuned it and tested along the way. But we've ended up with 6 procrastination types. Okay, you have 6,
and you could be at different, like crossover on different parts of it.
You can have some patterns. You can have some patterns, but it's what you're predominantly leaning into.
A predominant one.
Yeah, absolutely. So mine is the obsessive idealist. Right, my pattern tends to be the perfectionist. Yeah, the high achiever. I think you may be very close to me, bro. I think you might be similar in that sense. Naturally, a lot of well-performing entrepreneurs are obsessive idealists. They do struggle at times with like adrenal fatigue or exhaustion. They have an all or nothing type of personality. They sometimes like, depending on how inspired or aligned they are, sometimes they may involve themselves in like building things and creating things for the fun, the sport of business. But sometimes what happens is they may not fully be aligned to it, but they're like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And they kind of wait until the pain of the like rush comes in, and they thrive off the adrenaline rush. And even if they don't finish it on time, it's almost like they wait till the pain gets really painful and then they go for it. And it's like an unhealthy kind of, it's like people that attract a toxic person. It's an unhealthy relationship. Maybe you can still have some fun and do things, The question is, do you want to always be operating from pain, or do you want to be able to create from pleasure because you want to create it as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's like one type. Then we have the 5 other types. Second type is the stargazer. They tend to be very good with like big visions and ideas, but they have the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
So they'll like start things, but they'll never finish them. And maybe they'll finish some things, but they're never usually content with it because they keep hopping around a lot,
Yep.
right? So stargazer, we have the dreadhead, which is the one that is scared of the uncomfortable, right?
Yep.
Like that stays in their comfort zone. They tend to talk themselves out of things. They live in this land of like, what if it doesn't work? What if it goes wrong? And they beat themselves up a lot because they know that they could be doing things, but they just they're overwhelmed by the fear of ridicule, right? Putting themselves out there. And then you have the next type, which is the radical defiant. The radical defiant is very rebellious. They rebel, but not in a good way. Because, as entrepreneurs,
everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like they got to fight with everything around them.
Yeah.
They tend to miss out on really partnering with people and working as a team because they're in survival. They also have like a bit of a shell over who they really are. They're wearing a mask and they're not really who they truly are to the public.
Yep.
When they go home, they feel, sad within themselves and a lot of anger. Actually, they hold a lot of anger and resentment. And a lot of this can be formed from childhood, but I categorize it so that we can tackle it and work out the re-patterns. That's more of what it is.
Yep.
But all the procrastination types are developed from childhood and family dynamics. That's just where it comes from. But we have the next type, which is the diversion junkie. They tend to distract themselves a lot. So their intentions are well and good, but they divert because they try to avoid the feeling of ridicule and rejection. So they may be actually really good at creating content, but to put themselves out there, to sit in front of a camera, they get really scared to do that because they don't want to be judged and ridiculed. And they tend to find ways to chase entertaining distractions, right? To avoid things. They're very much in an avoidant pattern when it comes to creation and production.
Yep.
And then we have the last type, which is the angry altruist, right? Altruism is to give, right? Narcissism is to just self-absorb and take it all for yourself. The angry altruist is the people pleaser, right? Because they tend to attract people where they give, but that person never really shows appreciation, and then they feel resentment towards that person.
Yeah.
The people pleaser gives so much that even though they resent other people, secretly they're actually resenting themselves.
Yeah.
Because they're not knowing how to balance their time, and they find so much meaning in giving and contributing, but they get angry about the fact that they haven't got what they've wanted on the back because they always put themselves on the back burner. So they don't know how to fill their cup, right? So look, we can have some of these patterns, like we all do it, we're human, but what I'm more concerned is like starting with where you're leaning in the most, and we work with that, and then we look at some other repatterns later. But man, I've seen people really harmonize their life and like rebalance into a really powerful center when they can overcome these procrastination patterns. It's really cool. I think
maybe what's also powerful, and now that you're doing this work with people, you're probably seeing the community aspect of that. Like every one of us tends to think that my problems that I deal with is only for me. And when you realize that there's other people that, have similar kind of, things that they're dealing with, it's like gives us a little bit of comfort as well. It's like, oh, okay. And then it kind of allows us, rather than being confused about it constantly, and it's like, oh, this is just for me, and it stops us talking to people, and because there's always this fear of being judged and whatever else. It probably gives people some permission to step into to take ownership.
Absolutely,
of that.
And we've built an ecosystem, and we're launching in January 2023.
Cool.
So it's coming really, really soon.
So it'll be an online test, and people will be able to jump on there.
I mean, you can do it right now. You can go to allbliss.com. So AWEBLISS.com/quiz, and you can take it. It takes like 3 minutes. We timed it. It's like a 3-minute quiz. Cool. Just select multiple choice. Choose which patterns you notice and be real with yourself. Because if you're not honest, you're not going to get the correct result. But it will come up with your type. You'll find out which one you are. And then we send you a free report. It's like a 10-page, 8-page, 10, 12-page report, depending on your type.
What people need to do about it.
Yeah, it'll show you like kind of why those patterns have come into play, like what you can address. And then on top of it, I'm also running live masterclasses. We have trainings and workshops to be able to repattern. So I have I'm very big on exercises and practical, tangible things that you do. Especially as a coach, I want to see transformation. I'm not just giving you information. I want you to write and put pen to pad and like go through exercises and shift your perceptions and challenge your whole time frame and look at it in a different way.
This is one of the things about procrastination is, and you would see this more than anybody, people that are stuck on this personal development treadwheel and
information overload. Yeah.
And go and do one course and then don't take action, go do the next course and constant fixing. And that's just another form of procrastination.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, it is. Well, yeah, and actually it's interesting because the stargazer, the one that like is big vision and everything, they tend to consume the most information. So I'm actually, as we've got people doing the quiz, it's crazy because I'm actually getting more statistics now and working out there's even deeper underlying patterns that are happening.
You're seeing their reactions and how they respond and the questions they're asking.
Yeah, like you have higher open rates with certain types and we're like scratching our head like, what's going on here? Yeah. And we find some consume more than others. Some don't think that they actually have a problem. The obsessive idealists will like quickly look at it and not spend as much time because they want in and out because they like they need that like big stimuli hit.
So there's a certain type which is more likely to do the test than not do the test anyway.
Well, they all do. They all pretty much do the test. The radical defiant is the lowest always because they just rebel and they're just like, man, I don't need this. I'm good enough. But it's a false sense of self and they actually shoot themselves in the foot most of the time. Now, if you're a radical defiant that's actually done it, I would challenge you to like follow it all the way through and do it because your life will be next level if you do.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to kind of see how people respond. And I love this. I love the science of self-development. I love, I did a DNA test recently in Toronto and found out like what my genes were and what my patterns, mood, behaviors were, how it's affecting my sleep and what my diet and nutrition is. And I get super nerdy and geeky over this stuff because I'm always looking at ways to optimize.
Yeah.
I know you're the same way too. Like you pay attention to your health and you keep fit and you keep optimizing and looking at the small percentages to make the shift. And that's what it is. It's like, we go back to that conversation around what if something happened in the world, like a big economic collapse or something, and you have worked on your patterns and now you're in creation and now you're powerful in your approach. Now you're negotiating and you have the confidence. If something like that happened, you're going to be able to know, all right, you know what? I'm going to pivot my business or I'm going to launch a new business or I'm going to find ways to invest. And you have the confidence to trust yourself more because you're not stuck in this loop that's keeping you in scarcity and lack. And that's the whole key. Beat it to the punch, guys. Like do it now.
I would even take it to another level. And what if the whole world turned upside down? The thought experiment is, well, what value are you going to be able to add?
Yes.
What you're teaching people is how to find their leadership true north might be another way of, the way I'm thinking about it and how they can assimilate themselves into communities. And if the world turned upside down, well, how would you respond? How would you be? I mean, I'm pretty sure I know how I would be and I surround myself with people that I know that if that happened, well, who's going to turn on? Like who is going to step up and turn on, and who is just going to like just crumble and fall apart?
Well, I pay very close attention to words as a coach, right? Like because we say a lot behind one word. It could have multiple things. You said the word respond. If something happened, how would you respond?
Yeah,
you're coming from a place of power and creation by saying the word respond. Now, someone that hasn't worked through their procrastination patterns, they haven't got structure in their life, they would react. That's a different thing, right? Responding and reacting. And I see it a lot, man. I see people leave things until the last minute and they wonder why life is so tough, and it's hard to create from scarcity, man. Like I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. It happens from time to time for people, and they always say like rock bottom's the best place. And it's like, I get it. Like it's a very optimistic, it's almost like toxic positivity. It's like, okay, if you hit rock bottom because of some things you miss, okay, but like, let's not encourage that, right? Like, let's not encourage rock bottom. Like just start safeguarding and use preventatives to be able to create at a higher level now instead of waiting until it's falling to pieces,
Yeah. Last time we spoke, which was, I think it was August 2021, last year.
Yeah.
We spoke quite a lot about your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that was a super interesting conversation because one of the things I love about you and the way that you communicate, you're obviously a good speaker, a great communicator, is you have this ability to language your relationship with God in a way that separates it from religion, I guess.
Yeah. Spot on.
Because I think a lot of people have, like myself, it's like, okay, I have a relationship with God, but I don't necessarily put any meaning to what God is. Your relationship to God is different to mine. And how has that evolved over the last year or so? Is that to something that's kind of getting stronger? And one thing I'm noticing, and just on social media, and I may be wrong, but I'm starting to feel like with all the nonsense that happens, especially in America, with like this, gender issues and all this kind of just absolute fucking nonsense that happens. There's a lot of people feeling and calling out for kind of reaching out for something more fulfilling, reaching out for God in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's just what I'm observing just through social media, etc. Is that something that you're witnessing? Is that something that people are calling for?
Yeah, they are, man. Like it's inbuilt within us. It's in our soul. Our soul wants to progress forward. And then when things happen in the world where it starts impeding on our forward progression of our soul, we start to feel lost. We actually start to feel like we need to make a decision, which is why I think during this whole, worldwide tyrannical push, which is typical of empire. It happens, man. You look all throughout history, empire keeps flexing on the people.
By the way, that's always been there.
Yeah, it has.
And it's always going to be there. It's just the difference now is people can see it.
Yeah, and we're in it. We're in the cycle now, and it's happening, right? So, but what I do know is you look at when 9/11 happened, there was like record-breaking number of people going back to church. When the Exorcist movie came out, there was tons of people going back to church. After World War I and World War II, people got very, religious again. It's like we know that there's an importance there, but usually, again, we don't do it until it's too late. And my whole thing is like, why would I wait for something if it is that meaningful? Why would I wait to go and connect with it in my time of like when I'm in dire straits? Why wouldn't I just do it now and grow in it? Same thing. Yeah. Beat it to the punch. Be like, yo, if it's that great, I want a relationship with a being, with a loving God right now that is only going to elevate me to a higher level. I can extinguish religion. And this is the thing, is what I want to break down. I don't have a problem with like religion per se, because I think like certain standards you live by and like practices are really good. Like we even see it here in Bali, like I can really respect that people are committed to their religious practice, and it does affect their character and they're great. I don't like empty religion, right? Empty religion is like a shell that's used for power and control and shaming and all the other stuff, and is a fake front to run sort of political powers through it, church and state power, religious state power,
and make people feel shame for not following them.
Yeah, exactly. It's manipulative, and we see it. It's evil by nature, right? Even though it has a front of like it's all nice and good. So I see through that.
Yes.
But what I see more than anything is I see that people are in a massive need right now for a relationship with their creator. And yes, you're right. People have different perceptions of who the creator is. People have different experiences. And, who am I to sit there judging somebody's experience? Because all I have to do is take my own mind back to like 8 years ago when I came to Christ. And I decided to choose to have a relationship with God, not religion, but relationship, and live in the standards of Christ. And I'm not perfect by any means. I flux in and out. I need to keep people around me that can hold me up sometimes. And I'm that person for them at times too, because we're all human. But like all I need to do is remember who I was before that. And I may be even worse than some people that I could stand and judge right now, unfairly, because we all are imperfect. And I think that that's a great call, with the fact that because we are imperfect, we do need a connection with our creator, because he's the one that created us. Why would we not go to the source and go, yo, how can I do this better? Yeah. And there's a lot of humbling that's required in the process. And I've done a lot of the personal development stuff, and I've been in the new age spaces, and I've, been in the business world with all the hedonistic practices around me, and I've been tempted, and I've made mistakes, and I've done things, I've lived in dark spaces, and I've been very egotistical, and I've made it all about status, and I've been selfish. I've lied. I've done all these things, man. Like I'm just like any most other people. Maybe I've done it more than most, but but I can look at it and go, you know what, man, I don't know everything. I only know a smidgen, really.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that like somebody, and I see it all the time when I see people really come into their walk with God, when somebody can throw themselves down before their creator and say, I don't know what I'm doing, man, I need your help. That's the start. Like right there is where you take a powerful step forward, because you're admitting for the first time that I've been winging it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I think if we can at least accept that, man, we open our mind, heart, and soul to something even greater. And that's where we start to really step into a purpose and a walk with God. Because I believe that we're not here just dancing with our DNA. We're actually here for a real reason. God put us on this earth for a reason. Like, it's not a mistake. You know, regardless of what Richard Dawkins and, you know, Sam Harris and these people say as atheists, which is foolish to me. We live in an intelligently designed universe. Like, you can't deny that. All you need to do is look at a miracle of a baby being born. Realize it came from these tiny little blobs that morphed into an actual being that can think and have an impact in this world.
Yeah.
Right? So I know and see that and go, wow, there must be purpose. So I want to know from my creator, what is my purpose? Not only what is my purpose, what is your purpose? What are you here for, man? Like, why would you not want to step into your purpose and fully flex? But it takes humility to say, I'm not going to do it without God.
And this is what I think is manifesting in a lot of the ridiculousness, you know, like, I mean, I'm going to sound controversial or whatever, but, you know, this whole movement around trans and the LGBTQ plus, whatever it is, there's so much nonsense around that. And, you know, just the conversations around people actually believing that men can breastfeed babies and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really offensive, especially to women that have gone through pregnancy. Like, that is very offensive to go that route.
This is a manifestation of godlessness. Like, that's the way I see it. Because if we, like you said, if we were humble and realize that we're just the tiniest little part of nature and look at how magnificent nature is, we wouldn't have this. It would be impossible to have this attitude of, no, what I say is the truth, and forget what, you know, forget the fact that there's male and female, and let's forget biology. What I say is the truth.
Yeah.
And then everybody's so fucking angry about it. It's like,
yeah, it's well, and that's the thing. Like, I've gone through, I guess, like a lot of internal questioning and even having conversations with LGBTQ community members. Like, I've had conversations with transgender. I've had conversations with homosexuals. You know, I personally am not in that bracket. But when I sit and have conversations with them, I genuinely believe that some of them feel within themselves attracted to the same sex, and and who am I to deny that that's the case, right? And I see it. It's just more like, I think what we see on the news and media, I think a lot of people on the underlying are like not really supportive of the narrative that's being pushed anyway, and it's unfortunate for them because it makes them look bad.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like, the way that it's used.
The majority of that community is. They're common sense. It's like
they just want to live their life, man. It's the same as you, mate. Like, we just want to live our life. Like, leave us alone. Stop trying to pin us against each other. And this is, again, man, it's empire. Like, if we didn't have the news and media, and we didn't have this ruling empire over us, and people getting triggered because empire's, you know, prodding the beehive, we probably wouldn't even be sitting here talking about this stuff. Like, it wouldn't even be on our radar. It's just like the internet, man, it's a good thing we have the internet, and it's a freaking terrible thing that we have the internet, because it hyper focuses us on communities and conversations that we never would have had until it came along. And this is what's happening with technology. Is it's a gift and a curse.
Yeah.
And the question is, like, are we going to use it for the gift that it is, or are we going to pay attention and be roped into the curse that it is too? Yeah. And as I've kind of gone through these inner challenges myself of like making sense of it and having conversations with people like you and many other people, it was kind of like, what's worth my time being triggered by and what am I going to rope my own energy into? And is it going to be conducive for my growth. If it's not, like, long term, I just don't know where we're going with it. And I think that ultimately a lot of people are being played by it. And I took a break from social media for a very short time. It was like just like a couple of days. Like, I should go for longer for sure. But it was just like a couple of days of just not looking at my content on there. And I already started feeling way better about things and felt more connected to people in person. And I feel like when we keep looking at this, we're being influenced in a way where we're actually shutting ourselves off a lot of time, because we're now thinking, you're over here, I'm over here, that person's that, this person's this, they're that label, they're that category, they're not safe, that person is. Now I'm more disconnected from people, which is unfortunate, because that person that I'm now like weary of because they seem to be a supporter of something that I'm against, that I saw on social media. You never know, man. We could be on a plane and the plane could crash in an ocean and we're stuck together and we're the only survivors, and I could end up having a bond with that person and find out that that person could be one of my best friends. You know what I mean? And this is, I know that's extreme, but I'm just saying, like, you never know, right? And so much of us are being influenced by what the empire wants us to be influenced by, not what we actually want to choose for ourselves anyway.
I think that's an important thing to realize, is that so much of this has been put upon us. Like, there are things in place, like there is no doubt that the media have agendas, and they like this whole, there's so many movements that are trying to get us to think a certain way and think of another group of people and separate us in a certain way. Yeah. And if you were to just completely remove the mainstream media, like, all the world's problems would probably go away.
Absolutely.
Because we wouldn't, there wouldn't be the divisiveness. There's always going to be differing opinions. But I actually, I got a question for you, kind of circling this agenda thing to religion. Have you gotten insights, or what have you learned about you could say, the church being a massive influence of control of people? Because let me give you have you watched have you seen this new Netflix series, Graham Hancock, Ancient Apocalypse?
No, I saw the preview of it. I didn't watch it.
Super interesting. Anyway, basically what he's going against a narrative of what archaeologists say. So archaeology basically says that more civilizations have only been around for 6,000 years, and before that it was just hunter-gatherer people, and before that there was nothing, right? And we're expected to kind of believe that all of a sudden hunter-gatherers started building pyramids and all this kind of stuff, right? And what's really interesting is that he's really in a very good way showing people just how stuck archaeology is. Like, they just do not want to acknowledge. They do a test and this carbon dates to, 12,600 BC, and then people just don't want to acknowledge it. It's like, no, that can't be correct. That cannot be correct. Now, that's one institution, archaeology, that have seemingly this, I don't know if it's an agenda or they're just so stuck they don't want to be wrong, but there's so many things which try to hold all the narratives together. And I think that so much of that has been born out of the church, probably from around the 1400s. There was things like, people don't realize that the calendar that we run by is completely made up. The Gregorian calendar was made up. And we all take it for granted. We just accept it for what it was. There's 13 moon cycles in a year, and we accept that there's 12 months in a year, right? Yeah. Now, that might not seem like anything to somebody, but when you start to realize that somebody has invented a system of time that we follow, well, that's the way we live our lives, and we don't question it, right? Why don't we question it? And I think and going back to the Graham Hancock thing, what he's uncovering is that so many of these ancient civilizations, they were, destroyed, decimated by the Spanish conquistadors and, all that happened in the 1500s in Mexico and in South America. Yep. And they had a certain way of living, which these people wanted to completely destroy. Like they had cultures and their agenda was to destroy these cultures.
Yeah.
And then they go and build churches on the top of these pyramids.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it just, like, watching this series, I start to just think, like, how much of everything that we experience, the books that we're fed in school and everything, it's all come from this system which has been kind of fed to us, drip fed down from the church. Absolutely. From that time period.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like, look,
all I know it's a big rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'll try and tie it in a pretty little bow.
Well, my question is, what have you learned? Like, is there specific things that you've gotten insights to in this regard?
Yeah, there's a running main theme. The thing is that I believe that if something is true, it's going to have consistency throughout time, right? And that's what I look for. Like, where's the common thread, right? Because we can have lots of different perceptions and things like that. I mean, all the things you mentioned are like man-made, right? It's not God-made. It's like God created the earth. We use the resources in it to build the things we want. We create the political systems. We create the news and media channels and the technology and all that stuff. We're all using God's resources that he put here for us. It's great. What a gift. We decide what we do with it, because we have free will. Religion has a lot to answer to, for sure. Like with the Christian Crusades, and you look at the Spanish Inquisition, and you see even just, burning the witches at the stake. And there's a lot of stuff that went on back in the day, for sure, man. But again, religion is man-made. Yes. It's not God-made. It's like... Yeah. We as humanity made that, right?
Yep.
And this is Jesus' big pushback, was like, come back to the kingdom. The kingdom is the kingdom of God. He's like, come back to this. I came here. He said, my purpose is to spread the good news of the kingdom of God, which is you don't have to keep living this way. Come back directly to your Father. Come back to him, connect with him, and walk on the path with me. Let's live in these standards. You don't need to do what the world is doing. And that's why the religious got so triggered and crucified him. They partnered with church, religion, and state. Boom. The political state of Rome came together as empire to destroy the truth, to take down Christ, they couldn't beat him because he rose again. But ultimately we're seeing this, and this is what's happening over and over again, a cycle of empire after empire. You had Babylon, then they got taken by Medo-Persia, then Medo-Persia got taken by the Greek Empire with Alexander the Great. And then Rome came in, and the greatest empire of all time came in and conquered Greece, and then they stole Greek philosophy and embedded it into their systems and brought all their pagan worship systems in, and then they brought the pagan worship systems into the Catholic Church. That's why you see it's different to the Protestant Christian Church. Protestant means protest against church and state. They pulled away because they could see that there were pagan rituals and idols, and they had changed the commandments and all these other things. Now, do I have a problem with Roman Catholic people? No. Like, I actually think there's a lot of Roman Catholic people that have pretty good characters and they're great, and they're living their life by God and everything, and they're sweet. It's the institution that I have the problems with. So, and this is the thing, it's like a constant practice of taking it out and going like, what's the institution? What is what God's really calling us to? And I believe that God created us with this original design. There's laws in nature. It's already there. Like, you can't defy the law of gravity. Good luck. Like, jump off a cliff and see if you can beat that one, right? The law of respiration, tie a plastic bag over your head and see if you'll survive. Like, it's just like, we can't go against hardcore absolute truth laws. God's created the universe to function in a way. You can't break it. If it got broken, it would take everything out. Like, we would live in shattered multiverses, and it'd just be messy, right? So ultimately, there is an original design, and we see it in nature. All you got to do is go sit in nature and go, oh my gosh, I feel amazing again. It's like, yeah, because that's what we're supposed to be in. That's where we're supposed to be, and we're meant to be in that frequency. That's what God originally created for us. We went and built all the buildings. We made the technology. We made the things that are distracting us and driving us crazy. God didn't make that.
Yeah.
So there's like this call to come back, come out of Babylon, come out of the system, come out of the empires, come out of the dark fallen kingdom, the matrix. As so many people refer to it, and Christ taught us how to come out of the matrix. He's like, I am the way. Right? You think of Neo, the Matrix. It's like Jesus was the actual Neo, but he followed it all the way through. Yeah. Whereas Neo, if you watch, he absorbs back into the system, and you can't fight the system with the system. It doesn't work. Yeah. You got to do it differently. Jesus did it differently. That's why it worked. So we see this, and then we see like empire is just going to keep doing what it does, man, because it's built off this need for power, and you will use destruction and force to try and hold its power position. And God is calling us to something different. He's the inverted. He's saying, stand in love, stand in truth, stand in liberty, which is freedom. And that's everything that he represents. I'm like, well, they're all really freaking good things, regardless of what religion. Like, let's take religion out the picture. Just that, I like that. Like, I want that in my life. So that's why, for me, I'm
and that's why
a big believer in
and
what
that's
Christ
why I share
teaches.
that I like the way that you communicate about God, because a lot of people, just have that natural, I guess they think of
Resistance.
God and anything to do with God, faith, and there's a natural resistance of like, no, religion is this, religion is that. And it's like,
well, here's the thing. Like, when people get really angry, why do they say, Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
I say, God. Like, they say it because there's an authority to him. Like, there's a incredible power and authority to these names because they've done things in life. Like, it's who they are. And like when I was more in the New Age space, a lot of people would say the universe. It's like, why would you refer to or try and connect with what has been created? Go to the creator, go even closer to the source. And the thing is, like, God is a relational being that we get to have a relationship with, we connect with. There's meaning there. Like, your life has meaning, so therefore
that's how
there's a reason for God to want to connect with us, right? Whereas if I'm saying universe, there's no deep relational aspect to it. And that's where I was getting confused like years ago. Now when I've come to understand this, I'm like, oh man, like this is the way. And we're meant to be relational. We're meant to be in community. We're meant to connect.
Yeah, that's how we're wired as humans. That's how we're wired.
But you see what's happening. The evil that plays out in Empire is trying to disconnect us from each other. It's trying to keep us in metaverses and trying to keep us in digital systems. That's the beast system that we've been warned about for over 2,000 years by Christ. Like, it's in the scriptures, man.
One thing that concerns me that's happening at the moment is this movement of, and there's global summits and all these things, the one world religion. Is that what they call it? The one world religion? Is that what they're calling it? And they're bringing together all the religious leaders of the world to try to create one world religion.
So funny, man. Yeah. It's funny because I don't feel like that's going to even be the case. Like, if you have a look, I mean, look, they're going to try, but like, a staunch Muslim's not going to give up their religion. Yeah. They're not going to want to bring it together with Christianity. They're not going to want to bring it together with Buddhism. Like, it's not going to happen, man. Like, not in that sense. I think what we're going to do as humanity, which we're already doing, is we'll fall into a religion, think around a certain ideology that's more centralized without even knowing that we're subscribing to a religion. Well, like in the scripture, Christ says, come out of her, my people. He's calling you out of Babylon. Babylon is, if you remember the story of Babylon, where there was a building of the tower to reach to the heavens. And then God split it and broke everybody into different languages because it wasn't a good thing for a whole bunch of all people to come together that were influencing evil to speak the same language to create more evil in the world. So he's like, I'm going to fracture the world so that people can be in their own communities and groups and be different. Like, there's no problem with us being different. That's great. That's fine. We're unique. Yep. But what's happening again is this evil influence is coming back in to go, let's build the Tower of Babel again. Where does the word Babel come from? It comes from the word Babel, which means confusion. So they create confusion to try and bring you into a funnel system, like a marketing system. Let's get everyone into the funnel, like a whole bunch of leads, and let's market to them our ideology to bring them in onto the conveyor belt into the beast system. This is what's happening, man.
Yeah. And this is where, like you said before about institutions, and I find that one thing that's kind of fascinating that's happening is Elon just took over Twitter, right? And as of yesterday or whatever, what I saw was, I think it's 65% of the employees are gone, right?
Whoa.
So 35
it's cutting costs.
Yeah, but this is what I'm pointing to about institutions and mega big companies, right? Okay, so Twitter's still going, it's still online, it's still going, but it's lost 65% of its employees. Now, my question is, how many of those employees were put in place to manage censorship, and then another department will be put on top to manage the censorship department, and then there'll be like an oversight committee overlooking that thing, and this is how governments work,
Yeah.
right? If you were just to pull the rug from underneath and eliminate all those departments, well, what would happen? It's like there's with these big institutions, it's just like there's things just stacked on top of each other, and then nothing makes any sense anymore. It's like everything just gets fucking messy. And I think that this is an important thing for people to actually realize how the world works and how the world has become, because like you're pointing to, it's important now for people to wake up and realize that's the way the world works. And how can you create some sovereignty for yourself and remove yourself out of that system, right? To realize that's the way that the world works, but I don't need that to affect me. I can create my own thing. So how do people do that?
Well, I think, like, I just think about my own patterns. If I'm sitting there looking at social media, I think Twitter is a very toxic place.
Yeah.
It's extremely toxic. Like,
I'm not really using it.
I had to catch myself even recently in the last few weeks. Like, you click the search section and all of a sudden there's all these things about all the stuff that we've been talking about, but I'm roped still in the same conversations, and I'm just like, I can't keep hearing this.
Yeah.
It's exhausting and it gets me angry. You know what I mean? It's just about the injustices that are going on in the world. But I do know how I feel when I'm in my business and I'm in creation, and I do know how I feel when I'm in service, and I do know how I feel when I'm spending time with God. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do more of that. Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, because they haven't got like direction in their life and they haven't got clarity, and they aren't actually coming out of their procrastination ruts, and they're not finding that having that spiritual connection is really important for you to be grounded and connected to something greater than yourself. Like, if you're in that place, you're not going to sit around and get roped into the distractions and the brainwashing of the entertainment. I mean, we're all going to be brainwashed in some way. We all are, whether we like it or not. There's no escaping that, because we're just bombarded all the time. But you want to cut that down. It's like, let's cut that back and let's spend more time in creation. And it's all a practice, man. Everything's a practice. Like, abundance is a practice, creation is a practice, power, forgiveness, acceptance, love is a practice, just as much as scarcity and lack and fear. They're all a practice as well.
Yeah.
But if I'm watching the news and media and they're projecting a lot of fear-based, lack-based, scarcity-based things, then all I'm doing is practicing those emotions and feelings in myself, and it starts to pattern into my nature, and then that's who I'm becoming. You become who you worship, and what you worship, you become. It's just like, we've got to really guard our mind's eye. We're going to be very careful what we let in.
I think, and environment is so important. And I think that's why, people are drawn to places like Bali, because there's a lot of free thinkers here. And, I like I mentioned before, I've just been back in Australia for a week, first time in 3 years. I don't feel any calling to want to go back and live, like none, like just none. Like, I feel very much at home here in Bali, and sure, that's a personal choice, but I get the sense that I just really don't like the way that Australia is run, and there's even weirder things happening in Canada, and places that people thought were safe, and it's just not, right?
Yeah.
And the more time goes on, the more I feel disconnected from that, and I feel more drawn to places like Bali. And I think with what you're teaching people about procrastination and how to step into taking action and getting their own personal power, I think also removing yourself from those environments that you've been so used to for so long, because you can learn these tools, but then mum's going to be in your ear, or your school friends are going to be dragging you out on the weekends, and it's just choosing your environment is so important, and that's going to mean leaving people behind. That's going to mean making brave decisions, and like, no, I'm making a call for myself, and I'm leaving. And that in itself, just that is taking full radical responsibility for your outcome.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Tony Robbins, and I asked him, Tony, how do we live a better quality life? He goes, simple, make better quality decisions.
Yeah.
That was his answer. That was it. And I was like, I get it. Like, yeah, for real. Like it really, and you're talking about having courage or being brave. It is making one brave decision each day.
Yeah.
It's like investing a little bit of money, and then maybe the next day it's like having a conversation that you were in fear of, because it was confrontational, to clear something up. And then maybe the next day it's going and creating some content and putting it out online that you have a little bit of fear around, but you do it and you're like, oh, I'm actually safe. It's actually okay. I can do that and get away with it. It's fine. Maybe I'll do another one, and you do another one. And it's just one brave decision after another. It's like, I've met people that back in the day I used to think like, oh my gosh, they're killing it. And then I surpassed it. Like I went and did those things myself, and I was like, oh, actually it's just that they just committed to their decisions. I wasn't committing. Now I am. And now I'm living certain lifestyle like they are, but in my own unique way.
Yeah.
And I've met people that you would consider to be really successful, but they cry themselves to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Or they're spiritually bankrupt. They can have all the money in the world, but when I talk with them and I'm hearing their conversation, I'm like, that person is coming from so much lack and scarcity or so much ego. Like they're not going to be with a partner that wants to stay with them, or their kids aren't going to feel a connection with them because they're so full of themselves or selfish. So yeah, a lot of the time we glorify the wrong things, man. We think it's all out there, but there's so much that we can create in our own life instead of having to look at like what everybody else is doing and try and create what everybody else is doing. Look at it as inspiration, but don't look up at people. Don't pedestal. Just go, where is the greatness that lies within them? Where does it lie within me? And go for it.
They deal with the same shit that you and I deal with.
Absolutely.
It's so easy to put people on a pedestal and go, oh, like, well, I can't be like them and I'm dealing with these things. And it's like, actually they're dealing with the same shit and probably just in a higher scale as well. Like they've got the same problems, but on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
when you kind of rub shoulders with people at different levels, you just start to realize that I'm just the same as them. They're just the same as me. We're all dealing with the same shit.
And I think we're kind of there too, man. Like I think people really want real now.
Yeah.
They've seen that there's a lot of fake stuff out there and they're getting really sick of it because truth operates on its own frequency. You can feel it. It's like, oh, this feels different. Yeah. That's what people want, man. They want it because it's more trustworthy, especially right now when you can't trust, whatever, government or these other decisions. The question is, can you trust yourself?
Well, that's why voices like Andrew Tate, I think they just resonate with so many people because obviously he's speaking to young men. And I don't agree with everything he said. Well, not the way that he says everything, but he's just speaking his truth. And he's singing a song that just resonates with young men especially. It's like there's something inside of people that go, oh, there's something about the way that he's being that resonates with me. And he's just speaking his truth. Right or wrong, doesn't matter. He's speaking his truth.
Well, I mean, I remember this song that Kanye did. He says, we're all insecure. I'm just the first to admit it. There's that one line in his lyrics, and I was like, like that's it. Like the one that's willing to admit it, the rest that were already feeling it will go, oh yeah, I trust this person. Yeah, I feel that way too. It's like that person has a voice. When I was speaking up around the last 3 years, one of the things I kept hearing from people was like, oh, you really inspired me to speak up. And I was like, wow, like that was cool. Yeah. Like that's really cool. And I never even knew that would be the impact. And it would be the same for you because I've seen the things that you shared. And there were people that would have seen your stuff and gone,
for sure.
I'm going to share too. And I think that some people don't realize they have a voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they've been told to shut up or keep it down ever since they were a kid. Or they had like an event in their life where they, were laughed at or whatever or ridiculed, and they made it mean that I'm not smart enough or I'm not good enough.
And we underestimate that impact because
it's massive. Yeah.
It can be one small message that just lands with one person in a certain way that maybe just they connected with you in a certain way that they hadn't connected with before. And I think just that thing alone should be enough to like give people permission to like speak your truth, share your stuff, get your message out there in the world. As we say at Lighthouse, shine your light.
I love that.
Because
be the lighthouse of hope.
Because you don't know where that's going to go, and you don't know the ripple effects that that's going to have. Like that could land with somebody and impact somebody so profoundly, and then they go and do something new and different, and they impact the world. You just don't know.
Yeah. That's it, bro. Yeah. I love that. That's awesome.
Super important. So we've been going for over an hour now, and I know you got to jump on a call soon. So
Yeah, I got an interview with Remy Adeleke. He was in the Transformers movie.
Oh yeah,
I think he was in one of the other movies, maybe like I don't know if it was Pacific Rim or one of those other action movies. And he's ex Navy SEAL, Special Forces. He's got a new TV show, actually Special Forces, that he's in.
Cool.
And
he's
really cool, man.
Is there something that you've learned, or has there been with all these high profile people that you've been speaking to? Has there been some common thread, or some commonality with a lot of these people that has had them, reach the heights that they have?
Yep, absolutely. They know themselves really well. Yeah, that was like a very obvious thing with a lot of them.
Yeah.
If I asked them, what are your values? Like, they wouldn't sit and go, they just go,
right,
fitness, self-development. They just know it off the top of their head. It's coming straight from their heart, If I ask them, what do you believe about yourself? They could just go straight into it. I believe that I am powerful in my creation. I believe that I am worthy of building a successful business, right? The other thing is, if I ask them about their habits, they all had very similar habits. It was like exercise was huge. Like nearly most of them, I'd say pretty much all of them exercised to some degree, cardio or weightlifting, or they did, Pilates or whatever. Most of them meditated. If they didn't meditate, like as in Eastern meditation, they would pray and have their own relationship.
Some kind of
like a spiritual practice. Another one is they were very structured, so they had like to-do lists. They had their team managed, things delegated properly. This is a huge reason why they're successful in business. They would also make networking a really important thing. So a lot of them would go on coffee dates or like connect and like have mentors or masterminds. Like a lot of them did that too. So they were some pretty standout things. Also, they all had skills. They either hired or acquired the skills. So they acquired them and learned them themselves, and that started off their like venture into entrepreneurship or whatever, like, acting or, in the music industry. They got really good with their skill set, and then they kind of like hired people from there to leverage even harder.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people don't do that. They either try and do everything themselves, which is like a long road and frustrating and exhausting, or they hired a lot of people, but they didn't really like.
They're hiring just for the sake of hiring.
They hired, but they also didn't understand the skill set, the intricacies of the skill set that they needed to understand with people they hired. So they wasted a lot of money and time with people they hired, and they had to keep trying to find people because they didn't understand what these people needed to know. Yeah. And that's been my experience too, is like, if I didn't involve myself in not every single skill set, but at least the basics of some, I would have no idea what I'm expecting from somebody, and I could be getting completely ripped off. Yeah. So you got to understand, you got to be passionate about business in general. If you want to be a successful entrepreneur, you can't just be like, oh, I'm really passionate about this, but I don't really like business, because business is the vehicle in order for you to reach success with the thing you're passionate about. So all the ones that I know were like passionate about investing, passionate about business. Like, they loved the sport of it. Yeah. It was almost to the point where it wasn't even about the money. It was like the points on the scoreboard, and it was almost like their own challenge. Like, it's like, have you seen The Last Dance, that Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls documentary? Yeah, like, you see Michael Jordan gets to a point where, like, he was a team player. He was the best in the team, so they passed him the ball a lot. But he kind of got to a point where he wasn't even trying to outdo his teammates or even outdo the people on the court. He's trying to outdo himself. He was that, like, chess-minded, like playing chess with his own self to, like, strategically be better than he was. And that's an insane level of performance for anybody in any industry. So a lot of the successful people, they think like that too.
Yeah. Very cool insights, man.
Yeah.
So what's next for Joel Brown? Obviously, you're putting this test out there, and we'll send people the
quiz.
Links
and take the quiz. It's like 3 minutes. Allbliss.com/quiz. Allbliss is it's how to be awesome and live a bliss-filled life. So we bring the two words together, all bliss. Yeah, all bliss. It was cool. We got the apps, man. So you like get on the desktop version. Yeah. Jump in. It's like a monthly membership. You can jump in and be a part of the live trainings. We got accountability calls. There's faith element to it as well. Maybe about 60% of the coaches, speakers are faith-based. They believe in God and they have like a creation mindset. So it's something different. I think that's what's really standing us apart in the space, and people are really drawn to that because it's compatible with how they view the world and what they want to move towards in the future in the way of their relationship with God, but also their success they desire to create. And we have like over 60 different workshops in there. In every category of life, you're going to learn how to map out your vision game plan. We have, your business and career. We have wealth section. We have.
So is that all you, or you've got other people facilitating with you? Or?
I'm probably in about 20% of the content. The rest of it is,
cool. So
everybody else that I trust. Yeah, man. Like that's the thing, right? I wanted to create an ecosystem. I'm the co-founder. God's the co-founder too, man. Like I had this real cool spiritual moment with God. I was in Lombok on New Year's Eve, when we clicked over 2022, and I was laying out on the sunbed under the stars at midnight. I was like, God, what am I doing? Like, I want to go bigger now. Like, I'm ready to like not just do my thing. I want to do our thing. Like, what is it? And I jumped on the plane the next day, and I was just so restless, and I couldn't sleep at night, man. I went down and I just started writing all these things on the board, and all this came together.
All came together.
Yeah, it's a bit like my big thing is getting as many people off social media and spending time in the ecosystem where we like create and build our visions and produce, man.
Interesting point there about the feeling restless and anxious, because it's an interesting thing, because I know for myself, if I'm feeling that, I think I'm self-aware enough now to know that actually something's happening, something good is happening to me.
Excitement or stress. Yeah, it's like, which one is it?
Like something's trying to move through me, right? And it's manifesting as like this restlessness.
Yeah.
So if people are out there feeling that, it's like, well, maybe there's something good trying to channel through you. And,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe that too.
Awesome, bro. So thank you so much. We'll make sure people have got the links. And no doubt they'll be around for some time. Where are you off to next?
They probably will be around for, man. Maybe you can come to my studio and we'll do it at mine, wherever that is.
Yeah. Well, let's build a lighthouse somewhere else.
Yeah. Back to Australia, and then off to the States, and wherever else I'm needed.
Yeah.
To run some cool retreats and events and things like that. I love being in person, man. Like, the live events are the best. That's where we can facilitate the most transformation, and that's where the real stuff comes up. So
good stuff. Yeah. Do you remember the last question that I always ask? I probably asked you the last couple of times. So, if you had the superpower, the one-time superpower of mental telepathy, and you could share a message with all 8 billion souls on the planet, or whatever the number is now, if you could share one short, sharp, important message, what would that be?
Jesus loves you. That's it.
Nice.
Jesus loves you, man. Like, study him. Like, go. Like, just the reason why I read the Bible is because I see Christ and I see the standards that he lived in, and I see I'm like he's a dope dude, like really dope, like above all, right? But he pointed to the scriptures as authority for a reason. So I'm like, there's other wisdom in here. There's other things. So I would say, like, explore that. Like, there's a TV show called The Chosen. It's a TV series. It's got like 99% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's up there with like Titanic and Toy Story, which is crazy. It's blowing up. They independently produced it on a platform, and they've raised over like $70 million or something like that. Like, people will love it.
I haven't heard about it.
But it's like, it's TV series form of the life of Jesus, like walking earth. But it's not religious, but like, you get to actually have an insight into like, who was he really? And the way that they depict it is so good. It's very spot on to the way that he is, like, in his character. And I think if you like a lot of people are wanting to like self-develop, I think if you actually just like watch the life of Christ and actually like see how he walked, and then learn the standards that and the principles that he shares, your life would go to a whole new level.
Well, even what you were sharing before about the question about, what's the common threads of all these high performing people you're interviewing. Yeah. It's like what you're describing there are the characteristics and traits of what you might read about how Jesus lived his life. So
absolutely, yeah.
And regardless of your relationship with Jesus or any of that stuff, it's like,
man, I got friends that are like atheists. I got friends that are all sorts of different religious beliefs that are watching the shows right now, and they love it. They're like, oh, this is awesome. So I would say that there's a movie called The Case for Christ. If you are questioning whether like, if it's even all real and what happened there, like, watch that movie. It's really cool. It's about an atheist who became a believer, and he actually tried everything he could to investigate, and he was a journalist.
Like, he was trying to
debunk the whole thing. He went crazy trying to do it, and you watch the movie and watch how it all happens.
Really?
It's really cool, man. It's a really great movie. A lot of people watch it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That sounds
You'll
awesome.
love it. Yeah, you love it.
Yeah, it's probably pretty similar to me, man. Like, I didn't grow up religious in any way, and I didn't have any beliefs when I was young. And my parents, there was nothing in the family, and I found spirituality, but I was like, yeah, Jesus, God, blah blah blah, like church,
all in the same bucket,
all
kind
in
of
the same bucket kind
yeah.
of thing. And then, in the last 10 years, I've kind of been more. I want to learn. I want to talk to people like you, and because there's so much. I think the original teachings of any of these religions, the pure source of it was like real wisdom, like real wisdom. So if you remove the religion part out and go to those teachings, it's like it's powerful.
Yeah, just and then the institutions come along and they have a play around with it. So just go back to the source, go back to the original.
So dude, thanks very much for being on the show again and sharing the message the way that you do. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in back down the rabbit hole. And get yourself over to Lighthouse and get in the studio and jam over here with us. So guys, see you next time back down the rabbit hole. Make sure you go check out Joel. If you don't already know him, of course, you probably already do. But guys,
thanks
see you next time.
Ciao.